This is the story of a small animal welfare organization in Norway who started looking into the big problems of dog breeding. The Norwegian Society for Protection of Animals is a democratic, countrywide animal welfare organization. We have 25 local branches run on a voluntary basis that rescue around 6,000 animals annually. Animal rescue is our main activity. In the main office in Oslo, we have 11 employees. Since 2018, we have been working strategically to change the way dogs are bred. There is no doubt that what breeding has done and is doing to our dogs has created one of the biggest dog welfare problems in our times. Acknowledging the harm caused by man through the current breeding practices is the basis for NSPA's work. So we will now tell you a story that might never have happened if it wasn't for many years of campaigning and alarm calls from others than us. Both scientists and welfare campaigners several places in Europe have been warning about the high levels of inbreeding, disease, and suffering in many of our purebred dogs. Even the Kennel Club itself has told the world about the problems of inbreeding and breed-specific diseases in pedigree dogs for decades. We know that dogs are man's best friend, but are we really the dog's best friend? We saw that pedigree dog breeding has created a huge welfare problem and decided to get to the bottom of this and figure out how we can help these poor dogs. The journey towards the ambitious goal of changing the way dogs are bred began. We were determined that whatever we spend our precious animal welfare money on must result in a noticeably better future for the dogs. We have not succeeded before the dogs can feel the difference. With limited resources and only 2 people on the project, we early on had to prioritize hard on how to spend our time. We could not afford to spend time and energy on what would not create progress for the dogs. In 2018, we started an information campaign on breeding. Then we asked ourselves, have such campaigns ever led to a noticeably better health for the dogs? Several similar campaigns have been going on for years, leading perhaps to a greater awareness, but to no noticeably better future for our dogs. After over 20 years of campaigns, they are still suffering from inherited diseases and inbreeding, perhaps now more than ever. If you search for #pug on Instagram, you get around 24 million hits. One can only imagine what budget is needed to change such trends. We moved away from information campaigns when we realized that the effect was insufficient, and we understood that we had to take a totally different approach. So what about banning breeds, we asked ourselves? Could this solve the problems? The short answer to this question is no. By banning breeds, only new troubled breeds will emerge and the problems continue, just wrapped in another popular exterior. Banning breeds is like chasing one's tail and will not make the necessary changes for the dogs. Dialogue then. That's always the solution, isn't it? We certainly hoped that dialogue could lead to changes in the way dogs are bred. We had 2 meetings with the Norwegian Kennel Club prior to filing the lawsuit, where we raised our concern for particularly the brachycephalic breeds and the high degrees of inbreeding. Despite sharing our concern for the health for these dogs, the Norwegian Kennel Club did not want to choose the only path that can save the most vulnerable breeds, which is scientific crossbreeding. We had hoped they would have chosen crossbreeding to save the breeds and to give the dogs a better life. By doing so, we could have avoided a long and resource-demanding legal proceeding. Unfortunately, they didn't. We realized there really was no way around the courthouses. We decided on running a test case to determine whether the breeding of pedigree Cavalier King Charles Spaniel and English Bulldog had gone so far in the wrong direction that further breeding was in breach of the Animal Welfare Act. We contacted geneticists to get their professional opinions on dog breeding and learned two very important things: how extremely inbred the purebred dogs are, and that estimated breeding values is the right tool to manage the majority of inherited diseases. The best solution for the dogs is therefore both accepting outcross and start using estimated breeding values for relevant characteristics. Health, function, temperament, and genomic kinship are all important parameters for the dog's health and must be included in a scientific manner in all breeding plans. The whole dog must function, and mass data from the whole population is the way to achieve this. We all know what happens when we allow inbreeding or incest breeding. This picture is one of the kings from the Habsburg dynasty, King Charles II of Spain. Due to incest breeding between first cousins, double first cousins, and uncle niece, the Habsburgers had big jaws, big lips, and big tongues. They had long noses, mental retardation, growth problems, gastrointestinal problems, problems reproducing, and a 50% rate of infant mortality. Charles was born in 1665 and died when he was only 38 years old. Today we have legislation in place to prevent inbreeding to this level. It is common knowledge that inbreeding causes disease. How is this comparable with our dogs? In pedigree dog breeding, incest mating, just like the Habsburgers did, has been allowed and used actively to get desired traits in the offspring. Planned inbreeding between close relatives, such as half-siblings, cousins, uncle and niece, has been common within the kennel club system. The detrimental biological effects of inbreeding applies to all mammals, humans and dogs alike. The effects on the dogs are no secret and must be considered common knowledge. Let's take a closer look at the English Bulldog. They are health tested, so they should be okay, right? Or not? After incest breeding for over 100 years and a generation span much shorter than in humans, the effects on this lovely breed are extreme. Two big studies show that they have a genomic inbreeding coefficient at around 34%. This is the result of decades of inbreeding. Not only does the Bulldog suffer due to inbreeding, their extreme and desired exterior is a cause of ill health and serious welfare problems in itself. At least 3 of the genes that give them their brachycephalic look is fixed in the breed. This means that for these genes, there are probably no healthy variants left in the whole breed worldwide. The only way to help the English Bulldog out of this genetic dead end is through outcross. Healthy gene variants are desperately needed in these poor dogs. If we are to save some of the most vulnerable breeds, we must accept that they will have to look slightly different. We owe it to our dogs to choose health before vanity. After a great deal of pondering, there was no longer any doubt that the main problem is the system that facilitates breeding of purebred dogs run by the kennel clubs and the breed clubs. This system is based upon old and abandoned ideas about breeding. It is like the last 50 or 100 years of technology and genetic advancement is unfamiliar to the pedigree dog world. Today's system for breeding purebred dogs seems to be stuck in a Victorian time capsule. We then asked ourselves, Can necessary changes occur within such a system? The answer is no. As long as the Kennel Club holds on to old dogmas about exterior descriptions, breed purity, and closed stud books, their system will keep producing sick dogs. The current breeding paradigm will unfortunately continue to cause harm to many dogs, and it will eventually destroy the most vulnerable breeds. If the aim is to save dog breeds, then we are truly heading in the wrong direction. Research, science, and the fact that outcross is the inevitable solution to the problems can simply no longer be ignored in dog breeding. We were soon to discover, in Norway, these poor dogs are not only let down by an outdated, unscientific breeding system. In the beginning of 2019, we reported 18 show dogs we regarded unfit for breeding to the Norwegian Animal Welfare Authority. We had observed their breeding struggles at the biggest dog exhibition in Norway. In the following reports from the Animal Welfare Authority, none of these dogs got banned from breeding. To our huge disappointment, but not to our surprise, it turned out the Animal Welfare Authority is also letting the dogs down. So there we had it. Absolutely no one and nothing protects our dogs from being bred with inherited diseases and poor health. The law has no effect when the Animal Welfare Authority also seems to choose breed purity over science and dog welfare. So this means no one is protecting the dogs. But no one is protecting the breeders either, most of which are laypersons with a huge love for dogs and a desire to do the right thing. They are being told that they are good breeders because they are following and trusting the Kennel Club system. And really, who can blame them? They are being convinced by the Kennel Club and the breed clubs that what they are doing is preserving the breeds, and that a health testing regime will produce better and healthier dogs in the next generation. We cannot blame the individual breeder for following a system that they are being told by the Kennel Club is good and best practice. The reality is that the breeds in themselves are so sick and inbred worldwide that in Norway, further breeding may constitute a breach of the Animal Welfare Act. So breeders that are breeding in accordance with the Kennel Club's best practice can risk breaking the law. So summed up, we had found a breeding system guaranteed to produce many sick dogs, a government unwilling or unable to protect the dogs from unethical breeding, and breeders assuming they are doing a great job. Dialogue hadn't worked. Campaigns hadn't worked. If we truly were to change things for the better for our dogs, there really was not much left to do than start stepping onto the legal route. Today's breeding of purebred dogs is without a doubt a preposterous action done by humans. And the Animal Welfare Act is there to protect the dogs from unnecessary harm, such as the detrimental results of inbreeding. We took the case to the courts. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won on behalf of the dogs. The Supreme Court in Norway has made it clear that for the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, the prevalence of the painful condition CMSM, where the skull is too small to fit the dog's brain, is too high to allow further breeding on that condition alone. The verdict is based on both health status from breeding Cavaliers in Norway and on international research into Cavalier health and genetics. For the English Bulldog, further breeding within the current Kennel Club scheme is accepted under the condition that both the reproductive problems in the breed and their respiratory function will improve. Using English Bulldogs with BOAS Grade 2 in breeding is not accepted on welfare grounds. So summed up, in Norway the courthouses have now made it clear that not only do today's systems for breeding purebred dogs lead to sick and inbred dogs,
but the system is also luring some of the best breeders into potentially breaching the Animal Welfare Act, which in Norway can give up to 3 years in prison. This is the first time in Norway that an animal welfare organization has been successful in the Supreme Court. The court agreed that breeding of Cavalier was in violation of the Animal Welfare Act and had to stop. The Supreme Court also stated that breeding dogs with Boas grade 2 is illegal, and they raised a concern for dogs with Boas grade 1. This even though the Norwegian Animal Welfare Authority thought otherwise. And also, in this case, a legal provision went from being just a piece of paper to actually meaning something for the holders of the rights, the dogs. The dog breeding case is for these reasons truly historic. This is a huge victory for animal welfare. So now we know that the law can be used to protect the dogs from the harmful effects of the Norwegian Kennel Club's breeding policy. But we do not believe in banning breeds. We believe that better regulation of dog breeding is the way forward. So parallel to the court case, we have been working towards scientists, politicians, and the government to get better regulations. These are in the making. The first draft came last summer and was disappointingly enough a blueprint of the Kennel Club's ethical guidelines. This would mean business as usual. After the Supreme Court verdict, we are hoping that the next draft will be different. It is beyond any doubt that dog breeding needs a renaissance. Not doing what is best for our dogs is a betrayal. This means that business as usual is really not an option at this point in time. That leads us over to the million-dollar question. What is the solution? How can we breed good, sound dogs that will live long and have a desired behavior and good health and welfare? First of all, if we truly want to help the dogs, there really is no way around outcross. This is something everybody knows, but few dare to talk about. Watching new generations of dogs being born to suffering is negligent when we have the power and knowledge to change things. Most breeds suffer from inbreeding and lack of genetic diversity. We all learned about the troubles of inbreeding in primary school. Breeding close relatives is the recipe for an unlimited number of inherited diseases. It is common knowledge that inbreeding causes disease and ill health. There is no scientific dispute. Still, there seems to be a notion amongst breeders that purebred dogs have better health than mixed breeds because they are health tested. We all know this is untrue. Pedigree dogs suffer on average more from inherited diseases than mixed breeds, and they live shorter lives. Just like the famous pedigree humans of the Habsburg dynasty, pedigree dogs suffer from numerous debilitating diseases that can be resolved by outcrossing. The high levels of inbreeding in our dogs have led to disease and suffering for too long. The life expectancy for French bulldogs is now 4.5 years. Researchers are now claiming that the pug can no longer be regarded a typical dog from a health perspective. All Cavalier King Charles Spaniels have heart murmur by the age of 10. Most English bulldogs have severe hip dysplasia. 13% of Gordon setters lose all their claws. This is such a painful disease. The list is long, and this is caused by how they have been bred. So of course this can also be fixed through breeding by increasing the genetic diversity and allowing for a healthier body shape. This means new gene variants must be introduced. With scientific outcrossing, the dogs could end up looking almost the same, but with much better health. We have research and knowledge on how to breed healthy animals. When we have this knowledge, we are letting the dogs down by not using it.
As the American poet Maya Angelou says, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." A geneticist once asked me if it was really true that estimated breeding values are not used in dog breeding. She worked with cattle and simply could not understand how this could be. Estimated breeding values is the value of a dog's genes. In Norway, we have the databases needed for estimating breeding values on dogs readily available. The databases can be filled with data from all individuals in regard to health, function, temperament, and genomic kinship, and be used by the breeders when selecting dams and sires. Breeding is a science. It takes 5 years of higher education to become a geneticist. Breeding in small inbred populations with closed stud books is high-risk breeding. This certainly is not a job for laypersons alone, and so many of our purebred dogs show us why. It is heartbreaking what the pedigree dogs have been put through decade after decade. Bans and lawsuits should not be needed when the recipe for breeding well is readily available. If we really want to help the dogs and preserve the breeds, science and technology is the solution. We are imagining that in the close future there will be a science-based Tinder app for dogs. In Norway, we have the databases and infrastructure to achieve this today. Only when this is in place can we start talking about reputable breeders. So this story of ours has not yet come to an end. We will not be done until the dogs can really feel the difference. But we do know by now that the future for our dogs looks a lot brighter than it did 5 years ago. With all this knowledge, we hope the dog community is ready to play their part and embrace the future.